Strategic speech. President Obama promises to map out strategy to attack ISIS during a speech this week. Royals expecting. Little Prince George will soon have a new sibling. Resignation accepted. An Irish cardinal under pressure to resign steps down after reaching mandatory retirement age. And touch-up time. An iconic painting of our first president is about to get a facelift. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, September 8th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama plans to lay out a full strategy for confronting Islamic militants in Iraq and Syria. He's meeting with advisors and congressional leaders before addressing the nation on Wednesday. Wyatt Goolsby has more from the White House tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, the president is launching an effort to get support from both Capitol Hill and the American public. Earlier today, the president sent a letter to the Speaker of the House calling for congressional backing both for airstrikes against terrorists this past weekend and for airstrikes in the future. In that letter specifically, President Obama said the U.S. used airstrikes against the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, near the Mosul Dam on Saturday, a critical infrastructure site in Iraq. It could be an example of what's to come. The president says this Wednesday he will address the American people in a televised speech laying out his plan for how to deal with the militants. On Sunday, President Obama called the group a serious threat, but one of the U.S. is capable of dealing with. During a briefing here at the White House today, Press Secretary Josh Earnest said the president's strategy will not include American troops on the ground. Officials say the outline will include, though, military, political, and diplomatic efforts. And with Congress returning to work today, Republican Frank Wolf was already on the House floor saying he'll introduce a plan to authorize strikes against ISIS and other terrorist groups.
If we learn any lesson from 9/11, it is that wherever terrorist groups find safe haven to train and plot, the United States and our allies will be inevitably targeted. The purpose of this authorization is to end any ambiguity about the President's authority or the Congress's support for a U.S.-led international coalition to take action against this threat.
Obama sparked criticism before leaving for his NATO summit when he said his administration didn't have a strategy yet for confronting the extremists in Syria. We've also learned tonight that Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to Saudi Arabia and Jordan this week to meet with Mideast leaders about confronting the militants. The president has talked about working with a coalition and regional countries. We also know that the president will meet with congressional leaders from both parties here at the White House tomorrow. U.S. officials say at this point, based on all the intelligence that they've gathered, they can tell us that ISIS poses no serious or no imminent threat against the U.S. homeland right now, but they say they want to make sure that ISIS doesn't gain that ability. At the White House, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. President Obama is delaying his immigration plan until after Election Day. As Jason Calvi reports, this reverses his promise to take action near the end of the summer. Jason?
Right, and that change is frustrating allies on the left and putting them in a similar situation with Republicans, not happy with the president's position on immigration reform. Back on June 30th, here's what the president promised.
If Congress will not do their job, at least we can do ours. I expect the recommendations before the end of the summer, and I intend to adopt those recommendations without further delay.
But now there is a delay. The president says he won't act on immigration reform until after November's elections. Fellow Democrats criticized the president today.
It is a disappointment. It is a frustration. And more importantly, there are probably about 60 or 70,000 families of all stripes that this affects with possible deportations between now and after the election.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says Obama is playing politics. He says the president isn't saying he'll follow the law. He's just saying he'll go around the law once it's too late for Americans to hold his party accountable in the November elections. Maria Ponce fights for immigration reform. She says it's going to be harder to encourage Latinos to get to the polls this November.
This is another broken promise. The President of the United States has promised since 2008 and to deliver on immigration reform, and it's 2014 and he can't deliver. He hasn't delivered.
So now more waiting to see if the president will indeed act on immigration reform in November. The president told Meet the Press the delay is not to protect at-risk Democratic candidates, but rather to get everything in order and explain the possible actions to the American people. It's an issue the White House says is still ongoing. Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson said in a statement today that he needs $1.2 billion to deal with border security and the unaccompanied minors. If the money doesn't come, he says it'll have to come from a disaster relief fund instead. Brian?
All right, Jason Calvi, thank you. Running back Ray Rice is now indefinitely suspended from NFL games. He's also out of a job. The Baltimore Ravens cut Rice this afternoon as new video emerged. The video allegedly shows him striking his then-fiancée earlier this year. The NFL's suspension by Commissioner Roger Goodell also was based on the new video. The NFL was criticized for originally suspending Rice for just 2 games. Rice was charged with felony aggravated assault. He avoided jail time by entering a pretrial intervention program in May. Chick-fil-A's founder passed away early today. S. Truett Cathy was 93. He opened his first store in 1967 and built his restaurant empire from the ground up. There are now more than 1,800 Chick-fil-A outlets across the country. Cathy's business ethic was staunchly rooted in traditional values. Chain restaurants still close on Sundays, and he took some heat for his support of traditional family values. Cathy's funeral will be held Wednesday in Georgia. Former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin is now in federal prison. He's beginning a 10-year term at a low-security prison near Texarkana, Texas. Nagin was convicted in February on bribery, conspiracy, and money laundering charges. Prosecutors say his illegal actions began before Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, but then exploded in the rebuilding process that followed the hurricane. Missouri lawmakers are poised to vote this week to enact one of the nation's longest abortion waiting periods. Republican leaders say they're confident they will override Democratic Governor Jay Nixon's veto. The governor rejected legislation requiring doctors to wait 72 hours after consulting with women before performing abortions. Only South Dakota and Utah have similar waiting periods, with some exceptions in those states. Afghanistan's contested presidential election may not be resolved this week as expected. Abdullah, one of the 2 candidates contesting the election, says he will not accept the outcome of the ongoing vote audit. Abdullah and rival Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai both agreed to the audit as a way to resolve the deadlocked election earlier this year. President Obama spoke with both candidates over the weekend. The presidential face-off means the future of NATO assistance remains in doubt, just as the U.S. prepares to wind down its troop presence in Afghanistan. Chinese relatives of passengers aboard the Malaysia Airlines flight that went missing 6 months ago marked today's anniversary with prayer. More than 30 relatives prayed in small groups in a Beijing temple after police broke up a larger gathering outside. Family members wore T-shirts that read, "Pray for MH370 to return home safe and sound." The jetliner disappeared March the 8th after veering off course from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing. It's become one of aviation's biggest mysteries. Of the 239 people on board, 153 of them were Chinese nationals. Using boats and helicopters, rescuers are working to save thousands trapped by floods and landslides in the Himalayan region of Kashmir. 6 days of torrential rains have soaked both sides of this divided territory. India and Pakistan each claim the Kashmir region. Although the rain has now stopped, thousands are still in peril. The force of the water snapped electric pylons and disrupted mobile and landline phone networks. Many are still in the dark with no means of communication tonight. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Cardinal Brady, who reached the mandatory retirement age of 75 just 3 weeks ago. Brady presided over the Irish Church for much of the 2 decades that it has been enmeshed in scandal over clergy sex abuse. He'd been under pressure to resign after investigations revealed that he may have helped cover up a clergy sex abuse case. As expected, Monsignor Eamon Martin has been named Brady's replacement as Archbishop of Armagh. Martin has been outspoken about the need for more church accountability on child sex abuse. Pope Francis sent his condolences to the family of American journalist Stephen Sotloff, who was beheaded by ISIS. In a letter written on his behalf, the pontiff said he is deeply saddened to learn of Stephen's tragic death. The Pope also urged people everywhere to pray and work for forgiveness, healing, and peace. Sotloff's family held a memorial service for him on Friday in Florida. Pope Francis is also expressing his condolences for the violent weekend deaths of 3 nuns in East Africa. The Burundi Foreign Ministry has confirmed that 3 missionary nuns were found slain in their convent near the nation's capital. The ministry declined to give details, including exactly when or how those slayings occurred. The nuns' home diocese of Parma, Italy, said robbery appears to be the motive. Will Scotland remain part of the United Kingdom? Well, for the first time, a new poll by YouGov shows Scots are leaning towards independence. The poll shows the Yes campaign has the lead with 51%. 49% want to keep Scotland in the UK. If Scotland votes in favor of the Yes Party, the country would end a 307-year union with England. The official referendum vote is just 10 days away on September the 18th. Prince George will soon be a big brother. British royal officials say that Prince William and Duchess Kate are expecting their second child. Kate is being treated for acute morning sickness during this early phase of her pregnancy. You might recall that she had been hospitalized for morning sickness while pregnant with Prince George. It's still not clear if the Duchess will be able to carry out all of her planned engagements, including a trip to Malta later this month. The new royal baby will be the 4th in line to the throne after Prince George. 2 former presidents from 2 rival parties meet in Washington. Sounds like the start of a joke, and in a way, it was somewhat of a comedy routine. The jokes came between the serious elements of Presidents Clinton and Bush launching a new scholarship program. The goal is to encourage people to study presidential leadership and decision-making. Both see it as a way to give back to the country.
There's still a lot of life to live, and I think a great contribution to our country will be to educate the next generation of leaders.
Leadership styles they're all different, but in the end, we have to both let our differences flourish and come to some sort of understanding about how to deal with our challenges and how to go forward.
The program will also include the Johnson Presidential Center. It's the first time all 3 centers have worked on this kind of project together. The 2 former presidents also cracked jokes and gave us insights into their friendship that's evolved. They've recounted ways they're learning to deal with a selfie-happy public.
We were laughing about going to restaurants and having to spend our time taking selfies with people.
At least they're still asking, you know.
Yeah, that's right. And but it's like, it used to be people want to shake your hands. Now they want to have shaken your hand and have a record of it.
President Clinton revealed that he and Bush had private chats during Bush's 2 terms in office, and President Bush wished the best for Clinton, who is about to become a grandfather. Coming up, there is growing concern over a virus that's sending hundreds of kids to the hospital across the Midwest. And are millennials financially smarter than their debt-ridden parents? Many are saying no to credit cards. On this Monday, September the 8th, thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. In the Midwest and Southeast, hundreds of children are being rushed to hospitals because of a powerful respiratory virus. Doctors say it's one of the largest outbreaks they've seen in years. Doctors say the enterovirus shows up every year. It's often called a summer cold. This year, however, it's more serious and has made hundreds of children sick. The symptoms start out like a cold, but then get much worse.
My head started hurting after my lungs started sort of closing up.
White as a ghost, blue lips. He just passed out, had his eyes rolled back in his head, and had to call 911.
So far, children in 10 states have gotten sick. This particular strain of the enterovirus is uncommon but not new. Fewer than 100 cases have been reported since it was discovered in the 1960s. In contrast, Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City saw about 475 children with the virus.
The clusters that have been seen in the past and have been reported have been small clusters of maybe, say, 25, 30 patients, and we were seeing that many patients in a day.
Doctors at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say the number of hospitalizations could just be the tip of the iceberg in terms of severe cases.
Testing for this virus isn't routine, so there are many different germs that are circulating right now, and we don't know how much of them are caused by this new virus.
The good news is the virus is not fatal, and patients usually recover with limited treatment. The only thing you can do to try to stop it is to wash your hands and to keep areas sanitized. And the recovery period for the virus generally lasts only a week, and most kids get better without recurring problems. That's certainly good news. Well, not so good for U.S. workers. We may face a dim future. A survey of Harvard Business School alums shows stagnant or falling pay and fewer full-time job openings. More than 40% of those surveyed foresee lower pay and fewer benefits for workers. Roughly half favor outsourcing work over hiring staffers. Nearly half would rather invest in new technology than hire or retain workers. At the same time, the survey shows it's becoming harder for executives to find skilled workers. Twitter is now testing a way to let users go shopping or make charitable contributions between tweets. Using a new buy button, they can make purchases while using the social network. Some users will soon see the button on their mobile app on advertisements. After clicking the buy button, they'll be prompted to enter shipping and payment information. The order will then be sent to the merchant for delivery. Twitter says personal information will be encrypted and credit card details won't be given to sellers without permission. Young Americans are passing on plastic. Catherine Zeltner reports why fewer millennials now use credit cards.
Only 35% of Americans over the age of 30 don't have a credit card, but it's almost double for millennials. According to a new survey from Bankrate.com, more than 6 out of 10, or 63%, don't have a single credit card. So why are young Americans shying away from credit cards? Bankrate says the tough economy and mounting student debt have scared millennials away from plastic. And credit card reforms in recent years have made it more difficult for younger people to get cards in the first place. Many millennials are paying with debit cards, especially the prepaid variety. Even though this sounds responsible, using credit cards can be a great way to build your credit history. It shows lenders you can borrow money and pay it back on time, and that can help you qualify for better insurance policies, auto and mortgage loans, sometimes even a job. Millennials who don't use credit cards could be missing out on a chance to build a strong credit score. But experts still say it's better not to use a credit card than use one, but use it irresponsibly. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, this famous painting of George Washington is due for a high-tech touch-up. And in honor of Sunday's celebration of Grandparents' Day, we share some pictures of your grandkids. On Monday evening, thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. National Hispanic Heritage Month begins a week from today. It runs from September 15th through October 15th. Hispanics make up 16% of the U.S. population and account for 39 to 45% of American Catholics. Alejandro Aguilera-Titus is the Director of Hispanic Affairs for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. With so many Hispanics that make up the church here in America, how are our parishes doing reaching out to this population?
They're doing better and better. We have up to 25% of all parishes in the United States reaching out to Hispanic Latinos through what we call Hispanic ministry.
So is it a separate part of the parish, or are we bringing people together into one community?
Well, because we're the Catholic Church, we are bringing them together. We have what is called shared parishes, and that means that you have more than one community. I belong to one. We have ministries in French, English, and Spanish. So these three Catholic communities share the one parish, and we really relate well with one another, and we have wonderful celebrations that are multicultural and an experience of Catholicity that is quite remarkable.
Anyone who's been blessed to spend time in Mexico, Central America, South America knows how fervent some of the Catholic families are. What does this Hispanic population bring to our parishes here in the United States?
Well, first of all, numbers, because there are so many, and the number just grows. Every time a parish decides to open Hispanic ministry, the population just come out of the woodwork. It's just remarkable. We bring youth, a lot of young families, also a lot of joy about practicing the faith, music, gestures, traditions, a very authentic Marian devotion, which is profoundly Catholic, and other Catholic feasts that are very visible.
Other denominations are also attracting Hispanics. I wonder if you have any numbers in terms of the families who come here, how many actually stay in the Catholic Church, go to other denominations, or practice no religion at all?
Well, we are getting new numbers on that. Certainly the most concerning of the numbers is the growing number of Hispanics that are just not claiming any affiliation. Mm-hmm. And that number is growing. We have also significant numbers of Hispanic Latino Catholics being attracted to mostly Pentecostal churches. And what they like about them is the way they celebrate the faith, the song, the music, the liveliness. These churches are also very community-oriented, and they tend to be small in kind of small groups, which is all appealing to Hispanic Latinos. What we see, though, is that once a parish on a given town, let's say, opens Hispanic ministry, Hispanic Latinos that were being kind of invited to share in these Pentecostal churches will come back to the Catholic Church, because ultimately what immigrants want is to feel at home, to feel safe, to have a place they can belong to. And that is why it's so significant that bishops are really encouraging their pastors to respond to the Hispanic Latino presence in their midst. And once they respond, then Hispanic Latino Catholics can celebrate their faith in the Catholic tradition.
And the younger generation is key. I know your subcommittee really focuses on second and third generation Hispanics.
We are really trying to do that a lot more effectively. And when you do Hispanic ministry, you're doing young adult ministry too, because of the population. But one number that is very interesting here to consider is that when you look at Catholics under the age of 25, Hispanics constitute up to 60% of the Catholic population in the United States. So the bishops are really looking at how can we make sure that the children of immigrants have an experience of the Catholic faith that is enriching, solid, and is for the long haul.
There's the growth of the church. Alejandro, thank you for being with us, and happy
My pleasure.
Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you.
Well, it's a facelift, 200 years of the making. Catherine Elliott reports on an art restoration project at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery.
An iconic painting of George Washington is about to get a high-tech analysis and a careful touch-up.
In the long run, we are preserving this painting forever for posterity. And at this point in its history, it needs some attention. It's still very, very stable, but we want to be sure that our visitors are seeing it looking its absolute best.
This conservationist at the National Portrait Gallery is examining the so-called Lansdowne portrait before cleaning it. The Gilbert Stuart painting from 1796 iconically depicts America's first commander-in-chief.
When we acquired it in 2001, I only had time to do some x-rays of the entire surface of the painting, but I'd like to do some infrared imaging as well as look at it more closely through the microscope to determine more of the techniques and materials that were used by Gilbert Stuart.
Those previous x-rays revealed subtle changes the artist made as he went along. Gilbert painted over a second quill pen. He made adjustments to the height of the table, and he shifted Washington's famous stance.
I think Gilbert Stuart struggled with getting George Washington properly positioned in the large canvas. This particular painting has an awful lot of changes, and I think it reflects maybe his first rendition of this particular image of George Washington full length.
The portrait remains on display until 2016. Then it's off to the lab for treatment befitting the first president of the United States. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Catherine. And finally tonight, in honor of Grandparents' Day Sunday, we leave you tonight with some of the pictures that you sent us with your grandkids. Thanks for being with us tonight. Good night, and may God bless you.